Listen, the idea of having to mentally detox for high performance, for all of you who are high achievers or high performers and who want to keep sort of reaching for your peak, is just a no-brainer for me. Like it's a no-brainer, right? Because the more cluttered your mind is, the more cluttered your emotions are, it literally is like putting a handbrake on your performance. It puts a handbrake. So yeah, you're driving, but it takes more effort. You're revved up against this handbrake, right? And it's an incongruence because you're fighting with yourself. So here you are trying to be a high performer at work, or a high performer with your family or athletics, let's say. But you're fighting against all of this unconscious material, and maybe sometimes it's conscious, that just serves as something that's slowing you down and requires that you put so much more effort. It's really just technical. It's really just logical to think that your triggers are going to get in your way. Your cluttered, what I like to call the cluttered closet. How are you going to perform well and peak, have your peak experiences if you've got this, if you've got these like bundles that you're carrying all the time, bundles that you're carrying, right? Emotional, family history. It's just going to be hard. You can do it. People can do it. They do it all the time. So let's use some words, right? So what's your fuel source? That's the question, right? Is your fuel source fear? Fear of being less than, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment? Is that your fuel source? Or is your fuel source creativity, your cleanest thoughts, your cleanest motivations, right? I like to call it the 1/1. So if you think of the fraction 1/1, and you don't have to know math, you know, I was terrible at math, terrible, but I did remember this. Okay. So the fraction 1/1, right, equals 1, right, equals the whole 1. But positive 1 over negative 1 equals -1. And I like to use fractions a lot, right? Because even if you have positive thinking, even if you're working really hard as a performer, right? Whoever you are at work, for example, but your fuel source, which is the bottom fraction, is a -1. If your fuel source is guilt, shame, fear, okay? If your fuel source is, right, shame, for example, like I've got to show my dad that I did succeed, or I was the smallest guy. I was always the smallest guy in high school, so I always had to prove that I was better than others. That type of fuel source, that fraction on the bottom is a -1. So your results are going to end up positive 1 over -1 will equal -1 in some way, okay? And what we're shooting for, or what I believe in terms of really peaking performance, is positive 1 over positive 1. But in order to get that bottom fraction into a positive 1, you've got to clean up. So it makes so much sense to me that companies, that you, as someone who wants to be top-notch in your company or a top-notch in your family, right? This is men or women, however you identify. If you want to have that peak experience as a performer, it makes sense that your bottom fraction or your fuel source be clean. Be clean, like great gasoline for your Tesla, for your car. Sorry, not Tesla because it's electric, but for your car, right? Clean fuel source, right? So for your love life, if you have had like a history of abandonment, well, of course, listen to how you're going to start the dating apps. That's not clean at all. You're going in with the bottom fraction of -1. Sex life, right? If shame or embarrassment or fear is your bottom fraction, your sex life is going to be bumpy at minimum, okay? So in order for things to run well, in order for you to peak, it is so clear to me that you've got to have a mental detox, an emotional detox, a history, an emotional and mental detox of your family history. Clean it up in order for us to be high performers. Okay, we detox, we declutter. Okay, so let me just give you some of the ideas that I have when I work with people, okay? So number one, and I call this all like the fire inside package. The fire inside package. Okay, number one, conviction. Conviction. And conviction is way stronger than just believing in something. Conviction is the combination of belief and commitment. Okay? Conviction. When you have conviction, and that has to be number one. It has to be number one. Okay? Number two, desire. Desire. And that's not willpower. Willpower is different. Now, desire can maybe sometimes become willpower, and desire and conviction can become discipline. Sure, that's fine. But you've got to want it. There's nothing like when you know you want something. Wow, people move mountains when they want it. And how about when it's followed, when it's topped by conviction? I believe in this. I believe in this and I want it, right? Can you see the fire? Can you see the fire beginning there? For sure, for sure. Number three, tools. We need tools to do this, right? I heard Joe Dispenza say, you know, that we're at least, I don't think it's the age of information anymore, but I think we just went through the age of information with the internet and everything. We were receiving so much information, and we still are. I actually think we're moving into the age of emotions and feelings, but another video on that later. But he always said that it's not enough to know. No longer, it's not enough to know. We need to know how, okay? And we've got a plethora of tools. In dynamic, right, we have saying yes. There's all sorts of cleanup tools that we have, and meaning I'll go through that and you'll see a lot of videos. I have a ton of videos on the tools that we use, but we need, number one, conviction, desire, tools, and then community. Community comes later, but we need others who have the same fire inside. We do. We need others who get this language, who want to be peak performers, but detoxed, sober. And what do I mean by that? Emotionally sober, mentally sober. That's why psychotherapy is a tool, mindfulness is a tool, dynamic, what I teach, is a tool, breathwork is a tool, yoga is a tool. Okay, all of those are tools. Okay, so let me repeat. Yes, almost like hell yes. You have to detox. You have to be aligned mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, congruent, coherent, in order to be a peak performer at your job, in your family, in your sex life, in your love life, in your physical life. For sure, 100, okay? But it requires conviction, correct? It requires desire, it requires tools, and it requires community, okay? So yes, 100%, 100%, okay?